Hilchos bias Hamikdash perek shlishi. The laws of coming into the temple, chapter 3. We're done for now with talking about the Kohanim going into the temple. That was the last 2 days. A Kohen with torn clothes, a Kohen who was drunk, a Kohen going into specific places if he's not doing the service. Today we're going to talk about generally people that are tameh. And any regular Jew who has a level of ritual impurity, where can he go or she go, and where can they not on the temple grounds? So the Rambam begins with a more general division, and then he goes into more specifics. Halacha Aleph, mitzvah saseh, l'shaleach kol atmeim min hamikdash. There's a positive commandment to send out anybody who's impure from the mikdash. Now mikdash, we're going to see, means the holiest part of the Beis Hamikdash. So this part in the green, once you enter the Azara, the temple courtyard, and of course the Heichal, the actual structure, this part is called mikdash for this context. So you're supposed to send out anybody who's impure from the mikdash. Shenemar, as it says in the verse, Vishalchu min hamachane kol tzarua v'chol zav v'chol tomil nafesh. Torah says clearly, send out from the camp anybody who's tzarua. Tzarua means he has tzarat, that's the skin lesion. Zav means a person who has an emission from his body that's not regular. For a man, it's type of gonorrhea. For a woman, it would be irregular vaginal bleeding. And tamela nafesh means somebody who's impure from a corpse, touching a dead body. Zeh hamachane ha'omur kan, hu machane shchina. When Torah says the word machane, send them out of the camp, we're referring to the innermost camp. The camp that's called the camp of the Shechina. The Rambam told us in the beginning of this book that in the desert there were 3 camps. That the way it was built, the Mishkan was in the middle, the Levites camped around it, Levi, and then around it camped all the Jewish people. So where all the Jews were camping is called Machane Yisrael, where the Levites camp is called Machane Leviyah, and the Mishkan is called Machane Shechina. Now that was in the desert. Lidorot, for all generations, we have the same equivalent in Yerushalayim. So the whole Yerushalayim is called Machane Yisrael. Har Habayit, Temple Mount, is called Machane Leviyah. And then this area, in the green, is Machane Shechina. So when the Torah says, send them out of the Machne, it means send them out of the camp of the Shechina. Shehu mi Pesach Ezras Yisrael v'lifnim. That's from the entrance to the Jewish courtyard, the Israelites' courtyard, because this square is called the Ezras Nashim, the women's courtyard. Once you go into this door, this gate, it's called the Ezras Yisrael. So from the gateway of the Ezras Yisrael and inwards, that's called the Mikdash. You have to send out all the impure people from there. Now, if you read the verse literally, Shemei Ani, says the Rambam, I will learn from this, Sheham Mitzoira ve'hazav utmei meis shloshtan b'makom echad. Torah puts them all together. Whether you have tzaras, whether you're a zav, whether you're impure from a corpse, all 3 go to one place, right? Send them out of the camp means, okay, they go out of the green, but they all remain in one place. It says the Rambam Talmud Leimar b'mitzoira. Therefore we have a second verse. By the person who has tzaras, there's a second verse. What does it say? Here, Badad Yeshev, he needs to sit alone, Michutz lamachane moishavai. His dwelling place should be outside the camp. Now over here we know that this means Zem Machane Yisrael, Shu mi Pesach Yerushalayim belifnim. For the Mitzoira, he has to go out of the whole entire camp of Israel, the entire city. He needs to leave Jerusalem. So now it's like a bit of a funny balance. You said the Mitzoira and the Zav and the person who's impure from the corpse all go out together. But then you're telling me that the Mitzoira himself has to go out all the way from 3 camps. So how do we resolve it? It says the Rambam, Ma Mitzoira. Just like a person with tzaras. Shetum asay chamura, because the laws applying to his impurity are stricter. And the Rambam will give us some examples of that right now, but we're going to learn them at length in the Rambam's 10th book when we discuss taras at length. So when it comes to a person that has taras, his impurity is more stringent. Chamur shiluchai mishiluach chaverai, so the level to which he is sent out is stricter than the level to which his friends are sent out. He has to go all the way out of Jerusalem. Af kol shetum asay chamura chamur shiluchai mishiluach chaverai. So too, anybody on that list who has a higher degree of impurity, he has to go out from more places. Torah doesn't say that. Huh?
It means further places.
Further places than regular.
Yeah.
So Torah only says two places. Most people just out of the Hamikdash, out of the main structure. The Mitzayra, all the way out of Jerusalem. We're going to, Chutz Machane, all the way out of the city. So we're going to fill in. What are we going to fill in? There's a number of levels in between that, and we're going to say, according to the degrees of impurity, the more strict you are, the more places you have to leave. And then Rambam will go through the list. Lefichach, therefore, Mishalchenes HaMitzayra Chutz L'Shalish Machanes. The person with tzaras, he's the most severe. He has to leave completely all three camps. Shehu Chutz L'Yerushalayim. The equivalent in today's day would be outside of Jerusalem. Mipnei shehu metame bebiyah ma she'ein azav metame. Because he makes other things impure just by coming in. Person with tzaras comes into the house, walks into this room, everybody in the room becomes impure. Not so by azav. A person who has a regular, irregular emission doesn't make everybody tamei just by coming in. So the Mitzayra has this special severity. He goes all the way out. Halacha gimel u'mishalchin zavin v'zavos nidos v'yoldos. Then the next level, the person who has an irregular emission, whether it's a man or a woman. Nida is a menstruating woman, regular woman on her cycle. Yoldos, a woman who gives birth. All these four people have the same level of impurity, and they have to be sent out. Chutz l'shtei machnes. They go out of two camps. What does it mean, go out of two camps? Shehu chutz laharabayis. They go out of the Temple Mount. Here's the Temple Mount. Those are the enclosures of the Temple Mount. Zav, Zava, Nida, Yoldos. They go out of this fence. Mipnei shehein metamin. What's their severity? They transmit impurity, hamishkav v'hamoishav, even to things which they lie on or sit on, afilu mitachas ha'even, even under a stone. Mashe'ein hameis metame, which even a person that's impure by a corpse, even a corpse itself, doesn't do that. If a zav, or one of these four people, sat on a bed, and under the bed there's something, that thing becomes impure, because it's become a mishkav, it's become a lying source or a seating source for these people. So Mitzayra is the worst, most severe. Second level is the zav and his friends. And then Tmei Meis, a person who's impure from a dead body. Afilu hameis atzma, even the dead corpse itself. Mutar lihikanis larabayis, can go into the Temple Mount. You could literally have a coffin in this area, the Temple Mount Plaza. Shenemar, as it says, and we have a clear verse for this. Vayikach Moshe es atzmais Yosef imay. When the Jews left Egypt, Moses took the bones of Yosef that was left over, because he asked to be clearly brought out when the Jews would leave Egypt. He wanted to come out with them. So Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him. Wasn't even with him. Imay b'machane Levia, with him where he lived. Moshe lived in the Levi camp. The Harabayas is the equivalent of the Levi camp. So anybody that comes into contact with a dead body, even the dead body itself, can go into the Temple Mount. Now, in the desert, there were only three categories. Machane Yisrael, Levia, Shechina. Because the temple was a little bit structured differently, so the rabbis put in a couple of more levels in between. You have Yerushalayim, that's like Machane Yisrael. You have the Temple Mount, that's like Machane Levia. Before we jump to the main structure of the Beis Hamikdash, there's a couple of more levels. Hachel. Says the Rambam, the Chel is the perimeter right around the Beis Hamikdash structure. There was a little fence called a soireg, as we saw in the laws of the... Yeah, there was a little, like, about 30, 40 inch fence, pretty low fence, woven, lattice work. And once you pass that fence, you're in the Chel. So the Rambam says the Chel, Mishalchin mimenu oiv de kechavim utmei meisu bayalemides. We send from there non-Jews, Jews that are impure by contact with a corpse, and a Jew who had relations with a woman who was a nida. So he has a higher level of impurity. So they can hang around all around Temple Mount, but they can't pass that fence. But a person who was impure went to the mikveh. He's just waiting for the sun to set. He can go in there shekvar toval because he already went to the mikveh, so part of his impurity is off. Now the next level that the rabbis put in, Ezras Hanoshim, the women's courtyard. This is the women's courtyard, highlighted in the green. You're already, if you get there, that's past the Chel. The Chel is the area right outside it. Then you walk into the next thing. So over there, Mishalchem mimenu tvul yad. A person who went to the mikveh is waiting for sunset. We send him out of there. He can't be in there. Avol loy mechusar kippurim, but not somebody who's just missing full atonement. Missing full atonement is a person who has to go to the mikveh and bring a sacrifice to become fully pure. So he already went to the mikveh, the sun already set, but he hasn't yet brought the sacrifice. It's called Mechusar Kippurim. He could hang out in the women's courtyard. Mechusar Kippurim Hariv Shimsha. The person who was missing his full atonement already had sunset. He went to the mikveh and the day finished. So he's less impure. The Isur Tvul Yom B'Machane Leviyah Midivrei Seifrim says that Rambam, just to remind you, the fact that a Tvul Yom, a person who's in the mikveh waiting for sun to set, cannot be in the area of the Temple Mount is only a rabbinic injunction. It's not biblical. Then, Me'ezras Yisrael V'Lifnim, once you cross the border from this gate, and you're inside now the actual Azara, watch the switch. Now this part is highlighted in green. Afilu Mechusar Kippurim Lo Yikanis L'Sham. Even a person who is waiting for his final stage of atonement, he's already pure, he went to the mikveh, the sunset. He shouldn't go past there. Sha'adayin Lo Tahar Tara Gemura, because he didn't become fully pure. Shanemar, as we find by a woman who gave birth, V'chiper Aleha HaKayin V'Tahira. It says, she goes to the mikveh, then the Kohen has to bring the atonement, the sacrifice, and then V'Tahira, then she becomes pure. Now 1 second, go to the mikveh, you're already pure. So clearly, Miklal Sha'adayin Lo Nigmara Ta'arasa, that implies that her purity hasn't yet finished yet, till she brings the korban. And therefore, while the person who's waiting to bring the korban can hang out over here, but he shouldn't go in to the actual Azara, the actual temple courtyard.
So she still has to wait for nightfall as well?
Till her sacrifice is brought. Actually, the Rambam doesn't say it over here, but they used to stand in this gateway. Since you have to watch your sacrifice being brought, but you can't go inside, so anybody who was in that position used to stand right in here, in the hollow opening, and then they would watch, and then the second the sacrifice was brought, now they're pure, so they can go in. Halacha ches, hatameh hameshulach me'arabayis, if a person was impure, and therefore he was sent off of the Temple Mount, the higher level of impurity, im nichnas over b'leisaseh. If he goes in, he transgresses a negative commandment. Shanemar, as it says, v'yotza el michutz lamachane, he needs to go out of the camp, ze machane shchina, that's the innermost camp, the holy area. And then it says again, lo yava el toicha machane, he shouldn't come into the camp. It's a double expression, ze machane leviyah. That comes to include the Temple Mount, he also can't go into there. V'chein mitzayra shenichnas l'Yerushalayim. Same thing if a person has tzaras, who was supposed to be all the way out of the city. If he comes into the city, loike, he gets lashes. Transgresses his mitzvah. But if he goes into any other city that has a wall, even if he's not allowed, because he has to sit alone, he doesn't get lashes, only if he comes into Yerushalayim, then he gets lashes. Halacha tes, person with tzaras transgresses double. He doesn't just go into Jerusalem, he also goes into the Temple Mount, like a shmeinin. Now he gets 2 sets of lashes for 2 commandments that he transgressed. He went into the city and to the Temple Mount. By the way, Kesef Mishnah writes, if he goes into the 3rd level, if he goes into the holiest area, he gets 3rd set of lashes. But if only a rabbinic injunction was violated, a person who was impure from a dead body, or a person who went to the mikveh was waiting for sunset, goes in to the women's courtyard, this part that he wasn't allowed to go in rabbinically, or a person waiting to bring a sacrifice goes into the Jewish Israelite courtyard, even though they didn't get lashes, because it's not biblical, we would give him rabbinic lashes, because again, what he transgresses is a rabbinic prohibition. Says the Rambam, when you go into the next level, just like sending out people that are impure from the holiest area, the Mikdash, is a positive commandment. If they go in, they transgress a negative commandment. It says, they should not impurify, make impure their camp. That's the highest level, that's the highest place, that's the Shechina camp, the holiest camp. How do I know that you only get the transgression if you actually enter the premises? But let's say you would touch the courtyard from the outside, right? Because there's a thick wall. So somebody comes up to the wall and touches the wall. They didn't go in, just touch the wall. How do I know you're exempt? Shenemar biyoldis, because it says, by a birthing woman, ve'el hamikdash loy savoy. She should not come in to the holy area, which means only coming in, not just touching the outside wall. Halacha yud beis tameh shenichnas lemikdash. If a person who is impure goes into the holy temple, b'mezid, if he does so willfully, anush kares. He gets kares, heavenly excision. Shenemar, as it says, ve'im lo yechabes, uv saroi lo yirchatz. if he doesn't wash himself in the mikvah, or his clothing that he touched. If you don't go to the mikvah and you go into the temple, v'nasa avaynoi, you have to carry your sin, which is an expression of karet. Hashem takes care of you. B'shoigeg, if you went in unknowingly, there's different levels in unknowingly. Either it means you didn't know you became impure. There's even a possibility, think about it, it's before WhatsApp and internet. There could be a Jew who doesn't know what the temple looks like. So let's say he was impure and he walks onto the temple grounds, but he doesn't know that that's the temple. So he lived in northern Israel his whole life. He never had a chance to come visit, and then when the first time he comes to visit, he doesn't realize, oh, yeah, this is the temple. I didn't chap. That can be an example of shogeg. So then, in either situation, maybe carbon oilev, you bring what's called the up and down, the fluctuating sacrifice, which was basically dependent on how wealthy you were. You bring either an animal or birds or flour. Shanamar, as it says in the verses that talk about bringing the fluctuating sacrifice, it says, Oy nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tameh. Or if there's a soul that touches anything impure and then goes into the temple, you bring the sacrifice. You're only liable to excision or to a sacrifice in this holiest area, going past the Israelite courtyard. Or if the boundaries of the Azara were widened, as we explained in the laws of the temple, that it was possible if the high court deemed fit, they could make this area wider. So if they did so and they followed the procedure, and so it's actually holy, so you would also be liable to excision or a carbon over there. Halacha Yud Gimel, because we keep mentioning impurity, we have to define it a little bit. Even though it's not the book about impurity, each thing that we're going to discuss now has a lot of laws in later books. The Rambam will give it to us in short. What qualifies as a person who's impure, who's liable to excision if he goes into the temple? Kol shenitma betuma min hameis shehanazir megaleach aleha shekvar nisparesh b'nazirus. Category A, a person who becomes impure from a dead body in a way that if he was a Nazir, if he was a Nazirite, he would have to shave his head over it. Remember in the laws of the Nazirite, there was a bunch of levels of impurity from a corpse, high-level impurities, that if you touched it in that way, you had to completely shave your head and destroy your count. So the equivalent of that, if you became impure in that way and you went into the temple, you'd be liable. Or category B, you touched a person or a utensil which touched a corpse in one of those ways, one of those high-level ways. So you have the corpse, a utensil or a person touched it in that way, and you touch that person or utensil. That also qualifies you as impurity enough to not go into the temple. Because you're second place, you're second degree. You're second to the first element that touched the corpse. Or category C, you became impure from any other primary source of impurity, that are all going to be explained in their place. There are many different types of things, like a carcass of an animal or a rodent, all kinds of different avoy satuma, father's primary impurities. If you touch them, you're also impure, you can't go into the temple. Halacha Yudalit, klale shel davar, the bottom line principle, another way of saying it, kol haton bias mayim min ha-Torah, anybody who biblically would be required to go into a mikvah to become pure, chayav kares al bias Hamikdash, is liable to excision if he comes into the temple in that state, ba'afilu achar shetaval, even if he goes to the mikvah, ad sheyariv shimshe till the sun sets. Aval hamistame betumes min hameis, she'ena nazir megaleach aleim. But if you become impure from a corpse, in a lower level way, in a way which wouldn't require you had you been a nazir, it wouldn't require you to shave, even though you're going to be impure for 7 days, like you would be for touching a corpse. If you come into the temple, you're exempt. And similarly, if you're third or fourth degree, if you touch a utensil which touched the person, which touched the dead body. So dead body, person, utensil, you're fourth. Or the opposite. You touch the person who touched the utensil, which is touching a dead body. Notice that change of language. It doesn't say shenagu. It's a big thing in the commentaries if they have to be attached to the corpse, still touching the corpse, or they could have touched the corpse in the past. But in the literal sense, what he means is there's a corpse, there's a utensil touching the corpse right now, it's actively touching the corpse. Somebody touched that, and then you touch that person. Le'inyan truma, u'letami b'sar kodshim, even though in many ways you're still considered first degree. If you touch, let's say, truma food, or you touch sacrificial meat, you'll make it impure. You're going to be exempt for coming into the temple. Because these are all things that are passed on oral tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though you're exempt biblically, doesn't mean you're exempt rabbinically. The rabbis are going to give you rabbinic lashes. What if you weren't impure? You're fine. But you take a rodent or something like that into the temple, or you take somebody who's impure into the temple. Now, obviously you didn't touch them, because if you touched them, then you became impure also. But let's say you carried them in a way that would be okay. You took them in a pickup truck, or you were holding a spoon and you put a mouse on the edge of the spoon and you bring it in. Even though you're not impure, you're liable to excision, time mikdash Hashem, because you made Hashem's temple desecrated, impure. But if you're standing outside over here and you throw in something impure, even if it's a utensil which directly touched the corpse, you're exempt from excision, because you didn't go in and you didn't bring it in either. But you're obligated to get lashes. Shenemar, as it says, same verse as before, if you don't take care of the clothing or any utensils which became impure, then you get the sin. That teaches us for not washing yourself. You going in an impure state, you get the excision. If it's just clothing or utensils, you get lashes. Yud Zayin Yeroeli, it seems to me, even in this case of throwing in a utensil and getting lashes, that's only if it's a utensil which is itself a primary source of tumah. So again, for example, if it was clothing or utensils which were touched by a person who was impure from the corpse itself, which are a primary source of impurity. We're going to see this a lot later, different degrees of impurity, but let's say the corpse itself is called avi avois hatuma. You're the father of the fathers of impurity, and if you touch that, you become a primary source of impurity, avatuma. Aval beged shehurishaim, but if there's a utensil which is only first degree, which means that it touched another utensil which touched a corpse, if you bring it into the temple, you don't even get lashes, only rabbinic lashes. Also, if an impure person put his hand in, didn't put his body in, just his hand, he only gets rabbinic lashes. Same thing if a person is impure in any way of a rabbinic primary source of tumah, or you ate or drank impure food or drink, and you went into the temple purposely before you go to the mikveh, we give you rabbinic lashes. Somebody is impure, goes into the temple through the roof. I use this picture because it's an example we saw before. Person who had to, if the temple needed repairs, you would lower somebody down in a box through the roof. That's not the normal way of coming in. Coming in is you go through a door. So what if an impure person landed, jumped off a plane, and parachuted into the temple? Potter, says the Rambam, you're exempt. What does it say in the verse? She cannot come in. Tavai means coming in the normal way. Torah only obligates you if you come in the way of normally coming in. You're not off the hook completely. You're exempt from excision, but you get rabbinic lashes. Even if you came in what the Rambam calls a flying box. I think when this Rambam was written, people couldn't conceptualize it, but today with planes, this is completely obvious. There could be literally an object moving through the air, and it can transport you into a location. So if you come in with a flying box, here, even if you came in through the roof or even through the door, you came in through a moving compartment, you don't get the excision. Any place in the temple premises where if you came in there, you'd be obligated excision for doing it purposely, or a sacrifice for doing it unknowingly. If there was some source of impurity found there on Shabbos, Moitzi and Isa, you must take it out. It's okay to take it out, even though rabbinically you shouldn't move it, but the rabbinic injunctions were dispensed with in the temple. Ushara Mekaymis, any other place on temple premises besides for here, we just take a bowl and cover it. till after Shabbos. So kashein maitzin. Now, when you take it out on Shabbos, ein maitzin oisa ella b'pshutei klei eitz she'ein mekabel tuma. You should only take it out with what's called pshutei klei eitz. That means like a wooden utensil that doesn't have a receiving area. Let's say a cutting board. Okay, so a wooden cutting board. Which, as we're going to see at length in the laws of impurity, doesn't contract impurity. We don't want to increase impurity. See, if a Kohen were to, let's say, there's a dead mouse, right? So he goes and he puts it into his shirt. Now, he's made, not only the mouse is impure, now he's made his shirt impure. Even though it's faster. Go find the wooden cutting board, he's going to have to run to the temple kitchen and it's going to take time. Doesn't matter. Rather not increase the impurity, even if it delays taking care of it. Halacha chaf aleph, echad tamei shenichnas lemikdash tar, oy tar shenichnas lemikdash sheyesh by tuma. The principles are the same if you're impure and you go into the temple while it's pure, or you're pure and you go into the temple where there's impurity. You go in shaya meis tachas oil b'mikdash v'nichnasu tachas oil. Let's say there was a corpse somewhere under a roof, and you went in under the corpse. Classic example, sad example would be on Yom Kippur. Kohen Gadol, who wasn't worthy, used to go into the Holy of Holies, he would die. Right? They pulled him out with a chain. But if somebody would go in and be under the same roof as the corpse, that's this example right here. Harei zechai of kardes, you're going to be liable to excision. Sharei bi asay v'tumah bayin ka'achas. Coming into the room and becoming impure, come as one. And so you've entered the temple in an impure state. So this is all if somebody was impure before he comes inside. But what if nichnas lamikdash v'nitma sham achar shenichnas? What if you came into the temple, it was all kosher, and then you became impure after you come in? Afilu timei atzmai b'meizid, even if you made yourself impure, yimaher v'yibahel v'yetze b'derech k'tzara. So here's a special law. You have to hurry out, super fast, go out the shortest way. Now we'll soon define what shortest way means. Halacha chav beis, v'asur loy lishhois, oy lihishtachavos, oy latzeis b'derech haruka. It's forbidden to do one of three things. To wait, that's a prohibition of time. To bow, that's a prohibition of deed, of acting. Or to go out in a different way, the longer way. So it's three separate concepts. V'im shaha, if you did wait long enough, and we'll soon see how long that is. Or you went out the longer way, even if you didn't delay, you didn't pause. You just started walking out, but let's say you're over here, okay, and instead of walking out right here to the closest door, you went to the longer door. Or you turned around towards the structure of the temple and you bowed down. Again, even if you didn't delay, chayav kardios, you're liable to excision. If you were unknowing, if you were inadvertent, you bring a sacrifice. Very interesting case. Let's say you realize you're impure, you start walking out, but you're like, hey, I can't leave a temple if I don't bow. But I'm not going to turn around. He bowed down on his way out. So here, the bowing concept and the delaying concept converge. And there's a big discussion. The Rabbi has a long talk on this sikha here, on this halacha here. But the bottom line is the Rabbi says there's two different elements that are coming together, that are merging. How long would you have to delay in the bowing for the bowing to be considered a bowing on the way out? See, because in general, you have to bow towards the temple. So here's a depiction of the Jews prostrating themselves. They would prostrate themselves towards the temple. Temple structure's on the left. So when you are bowing the other way, it doesn't have a halachic status of bowing unless you waited enough time. Then the waiting creates what's called a geder hishtachava. It creates a definition of bowing on the bowing. So how long does that take? Kedei likros, the time it takes to read the following portion of the verse. Vayichru apayim arza al haritzva. They bowed with their faces to the ground on the floor. Vayishtachavu, and they prostrated themselves. V'hoides l'Hashem ki toiv ki le'olam chasdei, and they thanked Hashem who's always good, for His kindness is everlasting. V'zehu shir yishtachavaya. This, by the way, is the same time it takes to prostrate yourself. When we talk about prostration, it also means the time it takes to read this verse. But in our case, when you're going outwards, on your way out and you're bowing down, you have to wait that amount of time to allow your bowing to have a level of bowing. Mystically, it comes across much better because the idea of bowing is displaying bittul, nullification to godliness. Some people are on the level where their bowings are always bowings. They're completely in tune with Hashem. Some people are completely disconnected, but they go through the motions. They just bow because they force themselves. But some people are able to overcome their Yetzer Hara. They force themselves, but once they get into the moment, they start feeling it. Right? So the forcing brings out your inner core. And that's how the Rambam viewed every Jew. He said every Jew at his core wants to do what Hashem wants. He's connected. Sometimes you gotta force yourself, it looks like your Yetzer Hara covered you up, so we forced you to get into the zone. But once you're in the zone, your feelings come out. That's over here. You're on the way out, you're bowing towards the outside. Not usually a normal way of bowing, but if you wait long enough, it becomes a bowing. Here it's in a negative connotation. Now it makes you obligated to excision, but in the positive side, we can learn from this that sometimes we have to force ourselves, and then once we force ourselves to do the action, we'll start feeling it. Chav Dalid ve'ezahi derech haruka, what's defined as a long way? You have to go the short way, not the long way. Kol she'efshar le'lotzes min Hamikdash b'derech ktsara mimena. It's literally geographical. Check the map. If you can get out in a shorter way than this, you took a longer path. Yatsa b'ktsara, once you go out geographically in a shorter path, afal pisha lo yiratz, even if you don't run. Ela holach akev b'tzad gudol, you went with your heel next to your big toe, step by step. Afilu kol hayom, even if it took all day, pater, you're exempt, because you went out on the short path. On the other hand, yatsa ba'aruka, if you use the long path, afal pisha ratz v'dachak atzmei b'chol koich, even though you ran and you pushed yourself with all your strength, v'nimtza shir zman shehalach by ha'aruka, paches mishir azman shemhalach b'kaldim b'ktzara, and in practically speaking, it took you less time to get out of the long path than a regular person would walk out the short path. Hayil v'yatsa ba'aruka, chai, it doesn't matter. You went out the long path, you're obligated. Yatsa b'ktzara v'halach ma'at v'amad v'shah ma'at. What if you went out the short way, but you kept on pausing? You walked a little bit, you paused, you walked a little bit. If you would take all the pausing time together, it would create the time it takes to bow. If you did it purposely, you don't get lashes. If you did it inadvertently, you don't bring a sacrifice. Because it's all a doubt. And in doubt, we can't hold you accountable. But the rabbis will give you rabbinic lashes. They'll take care of you that way.